So we did the scapula and the clavicle in part 1, and we talked about their landmarks. So we didn't do the review questions. So my first question is the clavicle. Which end is the acromial end? So we have a nice round end here, which would be medial. Then we have a flatter end over here that is attached to the acromial process, so it sort of look like this. So which end is the acromial end? Well, the acromial end is this flatter end. See, it's flat. So that would be the lateral end because it articulates with the acromion. And the sternal end is the medial end. So the answer would be 1. So the scapula. The spine of the scapula ends with what structure? Well, here's the posterior surface. Here is the spine right here, and it ends in the acromion, or the acromial process. So that answer would be this one. It's not lateral. Now here I was mean. The coracoid process is on the scapula. It's on the anterior side, and it looks like a crow's beak. I passed a crow walking into my little office here, and no, it does not look like a crow's beak. Then this process is on a different bone. I would not do that on a test to put those two next to each other. What landmark is anterior? The spine of the scapula. Well, this is posterior. Remember, social dancing. Your hand is, the lead's hand is there. The supraspinous fossa. Well, this is the infraspinous. That's the supraspinous. The glenoid fossa. That's the glenoid fossa. So it must be the coracoid process right there. So the answer would be A. The humerus articulates with what? Here's a bone that thinks it's funny. It's going to, what does it fit on? No, it doesn't fit there. It fits right there. Left arm in, left arm out. And that is the glenofossa. So that is that one. Right there. There is no humeral fossa. The subscapular fossa is below the spine. The supraspinous the subscapular fossa is this one right here. The supraspinaeus fossa is up here. That's what happens when you try to read and point to something on a different screen at the same time. So, which scapular area lies inferior to the spine of the scapula? I'm not trying to trick you. It would be this one. So you get that I care about this fossa. So here's the spine again. Infraspinaeus fossa. Subscapular fossa. Supraspinaeus fossa. So, let's learn about a bone that thinks it's hilarious now. Oops! To tell left versus right, all of the following is true. Now, unfortunately for you guys, you can't just put the scapula on your back. So, this is actually lining up nicely. We're assuming that this is the back, the person's back is facing you. So the spine is going to be posterior. Uh-oh, I gave it away. Oops. Glenoid fossa is lateral. It has to be lateral. Inferior angle is inferior. Medial border is medial. So inferior angle. Lateral border is lateral. Superior angle is superior. So the spine is posterior. If it was anterior, you'd be sort of messed up there. So, bones of the upper limb. The humerus is in your brachium. So this is the humerus right here. I'm not sure if this is going over my recording or not. We have one radius and one ulna. The ulna actually has a U right there. We're going to learn that's the trochlea. And this is the medial bone of your forearm. There's a pointy little styloid process on your pinky finger. You could feel that on your lower arm. So go to your lower arm. Feel right on the pinky side, that little knob. That's a styloid process of the ulna. The radius has a nice, beautiful round head right there. It is the lateral bone, and this styloid process is on your thumb side. There are 8 carpal bones. It is in my contract to ask you about them by name. They each have a different name. 5 metacarpals, 14 phalanges. The thumb only has 2. The rest of the fingers have 3. So, without much ado, let's meet the bone that's not very funny. It's humerus. So here's the humerus. Now, this is the head of the humerus. Remember, heads are big, swollen epicondyles that there's usually one of. So this would be the head. This is the proximal part of the humerus. On the other end, we have the distal epicondyles, or the distal side. We have a nice true condyle right here. It's a rounded one. And remember, they're smaller than heads, and they usually come in pairs. Now, this is modified. It's actually called a trochlea, and its real name is the trochleella. And I'm trying to grab the right ulna. It's actually a right ulna in reality, and it's going to form a nice hinge joint. So the ulna is going to be on this trochleella. So we have met the humerus. It has a nice round head on the proximal side. On the distal side, it has one condyle, and the other condyle is modified into something called the trochleella, that the ulna fits nicely in and says, "Beefcake, I am Eric Cartman." Now, this condyle is actually going to articulate with the head of the radius. And if it weren't for a bunch of attachments, we'd have a pivot joint right here. It can go like this and like this. So the head of the radius can actually pivot around here. It is technically a true ball and socket joint, but there's a ton of ligaments attaching it to the ulna, so it doesn't act like your other ball and socket joints. But I get ahead of myself talking about those joints. So this side, we have two tubercles. This one is smaller than this one. So this bigger one is on the lateral side. This one is on the anterior side. It's the smaller one. So these tubercles are greater because this one's larger, and lesser because this one is smaller. So if I turn this one, I can't really put the larger one. That's the larger one. That would be greater. The smaller one would be lesser. So the anterior one is the lesser tubercle. The greater one, bigger one is the greater. Greater is lateral. And there's a groove or a sulcus between them. I like sulcus, so I'm going to teach you the intertubercle sulcus. It's also the intertubercle groove, but I will put sulcus on everything. So you have to learn sulcus. 5 zillion muscles attach either in the sulcus, below the sulcus, or on either of the two tubercles. I get to teach them all to you in 2 weeks. So we have the proximal end, we have the head, lesser tubercle, greater tubercle, and we have the intertubercular sulcus. There are 2 necks. The first neck is technically between the head and the tubercles. I can't show you this. I'm not convinced it really exists. There's not a narrow part of that bone. And that neck is called the anatomical neck. Now here, this is the surgical neck. Guess where this bone gets broken? Yep, right there, because that's the thin part. Now, as we go down, you see it's raised and roughened right here. That's where the deltoid muscle attaches to. And this is the deltoid tuberosity. Tubercle tuberosity. 7 billion muscles attach here. Only the deltoid attaches there, so that's the deltoid tuberosity. And we're going to go down to this end. This is the distal end. We have the condyle, and we have the trochleella right here. This condyle gets its name, or it's named the capitulum. I like to think you must capitulate and learn the name. Okay, it sounds evil. The capitulum is going to form a ball and socket joint with the head of Mr. Radius right here. And the trochleella is going to form, wrong side, a hinge joint with the ulna. Now, there are 2 epicondyles. This is the medial epicondyle. On the medial side of your forearm or upper arm, you can feel that at the elbow joint. It's nice and large. Then, if I rotate over this way, that's the lateral one. Your forearm muscles actually have origins there. Origins are where muscles attach. Now, if I move to the anterior, there is a fossa right here. This fossa is called the coronoid fossa. Remember we had the coracoid process? Well, that's the coronoid fossa. And Mr. Ulna has a process right here. Guess what it's called? It is the coronoid process. Now, when you contract, when you're doing your bicep curls, the process goes into the fossa, like so. So the coronoid process goes into the coronoid fossa, like that. Now let's look at the posterior side. Oh, there's a fossa right there too. This process right here of the ulna is called the olecranon process. And it goes together like this. So when you're doing your tricep extensions, hold on a sec. When you're doing your tricep extensions, the olecranon process goes into the olecranon fossa, like so. So it's similar to the 50 billion zygomatic processes touching the zygomatic bone. Well, the olecranon process goes into the olecranon fossa. The coronoid process is going to go into the coronoid fossa. So our proximal humerus, we have our information. There's the humerus. The head is here. That is the anatomical neck. I don't believe it really exists. And we have two tubercles. I have no idea why I have so much trouble saying that word correctly. The greater one is this big raised structure that is lateral. The lesser one is a raised structure that is anterior. This is the posterior view, so you can't see it. And there is a groove between the two. And that groove is the intertubercular sulcus. Technically, it's a groove as well. Now, when we learn about the shoulder, 5 zillion muscles are going to attach there, either in the groove, below the groove, or on either of the tubercles. Trick is to say it slowly, I think. This right here, it's a rough, flat area. That is a tuberosity, not to be confused with the tubercle. That is where the deltoid muscle attaches to. Now, the distal side. We have our distal humerus. We have the capitulum right there. That is a rounded structure that the head of the radius is going to pivot around. It's technically a ball and socket joint because you are flexing at that joint as well as pivoting around it. We have the trochleella, which means pulley in Latin. That is going to form a hinge joint with the ulna. And the notch on the ulna is called the trochlear notch, by the way. Now there's a fossa right there. That is called the coronoid fossa. Again, my promise was coronoid and coracoid are not going to be anywhere near each other on the test in a question. And on the posterior surface, we have the olecranon fossa. The coronoid process of the ulna goes in here when you're flexed. The olecranon process of the ulna goes in here while you are extending. Now there's 2 epicondyles. The medial one's bigger. Most of your forearm muscles are going to have origins there. That means that's their point of attachment. You have some that actually attach to the lateral epicondyle there. So those are the structures. A V-shaped rough surface about 1/3 of the way down on the humerus is what? Well, the only landmark I gave you there was the deltoid tuberosity. Trochleella is distal end. These are anterior, so yeah. The hinge joint of the elbow. What did I kept saying? It was the ulna or the radius? It's the ulna. So the trochlear notch of the ulna around the trochleella. Oops. So, we'll talk about that in our next video. So, that's it for our not so funny bone. Thank you very much. I will see you when we talk about the antebrachial region.